Welcome to another episode of the Dentology podcast, where we discuss the business of dentistry. In this podcast series, we'll be discussing all the non-clinical aspects of dentistry, from goodwill values, finance, marketing, how to buy and sell a dental practice, mindset, through to where you can invest your money in team management issues. My name is Andy Acton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Strevens. Let's jump straight into it. So welcome to another episode of Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. Today we have Adrian Dray joining us. He's experienced as a data protection officer for over 600 dental practices, both corporate and independently owned. Amazing, that's a lot, to be honest. He's investigated hundreds of data breaches, overseen thousands of record requests, and support practices through ICO, GDC, CQC, NHS, and police investigations relating to personal data. He's undoubtedly the leading dental GDPR expert in the UK, with a mission to empower dental professionals so they have the right level of knowledge and support to meet their level of responsibility, which is what we're going to chat about today. Brilliant. Previously was a teacher in a prestigious international school looking after celebrities and diplomats' kids, which would be an interesting conversation to have. Also worked as an IT engineer for the police. He's a musician, a singer, a songwriter, and a COVID survivor. So welcome, Adrian Dray.
Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you. Yeah, we can add that one after I sent that to you.
Exactly. What a repertoire of things that you've weaved through.
I'm largely disappointed that you couldn't get a lot of letters for police investigation relating to personal data after ICO, GDC, and CQC, and NHS.
RESPECT, Chris.
Yeah.
I forgot to put in part-time assassin and male model. Next time.
Exactly. That's a whole nother podcast channel.
Quasimodo. Right.
So give us your background in terms of what was it like being Adrian Dray growing up, and how you got yourself into the world of work. What did that look like as a young man?
I'm born and bred in Devon, in the southwest. I'm in the house I was brought up in now.
Really?
Just off on the outskirts of Dartmoor. So from my office, I can see the moors, which it was nice. I'm not your typical agricultural kind of guy. These are these hands are quite soft. Probably got softer hands than my wife, to be honest. And
at least you can't see the prison.
Yeah, well, that's true. That is true. Hopefully they can't see me either. I was very much for up until I was 23, very, very used to probably a small town mentality. The way things were, my parents are quite old, so it came to a point where even though we had quite a sort of a good background, upbringing, private school, that kind of thing, I needed to get out to work like from 16 straight away. So Dad was like, learn a trade, that kind of stuff. I was out when I was 14, I was in the armed service, all this kind of stuff. Like, times have changed, Dad, but okay, I feel you. Because I needed help, he's retired and that kind of stuff. And I just went into it. My family are salespeople. I didn't want to be a salesman. They're not the sort of slimy salespeople at all. I just didn't want to. I wanted to be the black sheep, a typical teenager, really. So I joined a local firm. But anyway, I'll speed it up for you as much as I started working for the police. Then got into telecom. I was a telecom engineer, and we're working with special branch, so anti-terrorism. We're involved in a lot of operations with that. You get a phone call. There's offices all around.
Is that your IT? Is that the IT bit, Adrian?
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is that it was the kind of knowledge that I had with police bespoke IT systems, right? So outside of that, I didn't really have the fundamental contextual knowledge to go and I'll go into another IT job.
Yeah.
But I got to a point when I was 23, and I rarely sort of admit this really. The reason I moved abroad was because I was seeing so much disturbing stuff working with the police. And I mean, this is when after the 7/7 attacks, and where there was a terrorist attack in Exeter, and you realise that the press have a very limited view of actually what's going on. You have to sign a Secrecy Act and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I can't take this anymore. I was 22, 23, and I was like, I've got to get out here. And all my other mates, they'd gone to Australia and America for a year and this kind of stuff. And I thought, I'm going to go to Europe, Scandinavia, give it a go for 6 months. And I thought I'll get a telecoms job over there because it's the capital of telecommunications with Ericsson and that kind of thing. So went there, thought give it a go for 6 months.
Which country did you go to, Adrian?
Sweden, Stockholm.
Right.
Can't speak a word of Swedish, but their English is better than ours, so it didn't really matter. I can say hello and goodbye, and that's about it. Became a love refugee, and Swedish girl, and I sort of stayed there. But I had this job. I don't know how I landed it. I started off as a substitute teacher at this international school, which was so much fun.
So perhaps that thing about you not necessarily being the black sheep of the family, not a particularly good salesperson, we might have to disagree, because you obviously sold yourself into a job that perhaps you weren't equipped for.
Yeah, sucker. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, they were that desperate. I remember the first substitute lesson I had.
Unless they were that desperate.
Talk yourself down, Adrian. That's what I like.
You'll do. So I remember the first job, considering that this school, right, the makeup of the school were celebrity kids, Swedish celebrities. I mean, it's very prestigious, the upper echelon of society's children, ambassadors, dignitaries, kids, that kind of thing. We've gone to this very prestigious international school, in the most prestigious one in the country. And my first lesson, or whatever you want to call it, was to take 30 kids by myself, right? Swimming lessons, some of which have never been in a body of water bigger than a bar, right? So I remember there was one that jumped off in the deep end, very excited, not being able to make it. I'm like putting my hand in trying to drag him out, right? And I'm thinking, I tell you what though, £17 an hour ain't bad for this. Anyway, no one died.
Which is a really important lesson, isn't it? For you and for the kids involved, that's a right result. Exactly. But after a few years of that, I got sort of more involved, giving my own lessons. Unfortunately, there's a change in law where you actually had to be with international schools, you had to be a qualified teacher in Sweden, learning actually Swedish.
What lessons did you teach?
So my main ones were English literature, music, a little bit of music for the little kids. I'm not very good.
The songwriter musician bit.
I'm rubbish with theory. PE, even though I'm not that great with that. And what was the other one? History. History was my main one. But I was sort of given I was called the Lost Boys, all those boys and girls. I was given a small group to take out of classes. These kids either had sort of behavioural issues, but not so much where they needed someone who was, a professional in that particular. Basically, they were very, very, very well-off kids who earned more in pocket money, in a week than I did at a month's salary.
Yeah.
These 15-year-old
different world.
So they didn't really care about stuff, but they needed to graduate. So the kind of teachers had given up on them. So I had to sort of get them there somehow in a smaller group. And I managed to do it. And I've got ones now that are sort of chefs. One's a chef in Turkey, got a couple of restaurants. The other one plays for the NFL in America.
Wow.
This sounds a bit like School of Rock with Jack Black. I'm seeing a Jack Black type character with these waifs and strays and herding cats and all these kids going on to do these amazingly successful things, and you just like strolling out with some dazzling waistcoat on and getting in some old 50-year-old American car and just jetting off.
Yeah, and I'll become a GDPR consultant.
That's not quite the Jack Black Hollywood ending.
No. It's so lost its little field, isn't it?
There's a come down, really. Sorry,
Chris. I like to call it entering my 30s. I'll tell you a very, very quick story that's make you laugh. So I was thinking about this today, actually, is that I took the kids out to with a couple of other teachers to a sort of science museum in Stockholm, and had a load of kids. Now, one of the exhibits was sort of like mining in Sweden kind of thing. I thought I'll go down, have a look at it, and I thought what I'll do is I'll tend to come down and I'll hide behind a piece of machinery, and I'll jump out and go boom, right? Anyway,
this already has a recipe going on well.
Yeah. Remember the makeup of the children, right? So, unbeknownst to me, the first one to come around the corner, I can't say his name, but his his dad was the ambassador for a Middle Eastern country, and he had his own security detail, undercover, armed people. And I sometimes saw him, sometimes didn't. Anyway, I jump out and go boo. He shouts something out and then quickly throws himself on me and then shouts something different. And I was like, we'll call him Ali for example. What did you say, Ali? What did you say? He's like, I said, what's that? Did you just do a kill order on me? He's like, yeah, pretty much. But he's okay. It's stopped. It's stopped now. I was like, Andy.
Wow. So you behave yourself after that?
Yeah. When I realised that I could be sort of messing with Mossad, then I thought, probably.
Given that this podcast is pointing towards the dental profession, people now are 6 or 7 minutes in thinking, I've tuned in, surely I'm on the wrong channel. This is the wrong episode. So there has to be a point where you're jumping out from behind machinery and scaring diplomats.
You're always getting shot.
Yeah. You managed to escape your life to somehow you fell into the world of dentistry. What was that segue looking like?
Well, I'll do, because you know what I'm like, Andy, king of context, if you can see after the last 7 minutes of discussion. But basically, I had to come back to the UK. My parents were very old. It was a good call, actually. It's a couple of years later, my dad unfortunately passed away, and I was able to nurse him because we live out in the middle of the sticks. There's no one here to do it. Whilst that was quite difficult, it was quite a privilege to be able to do that for him. Man, he's sort of quite, what do you call, sort of, I wouldn't say posh, but he wouldn't do well in the hospital with someone sort of washing him. I'd probably rather someone like me doing it.
Yeah.
And so I had to come back to England. And the thing was, I just felt like I've got to look at something else. Like I've got this background and I've got my contacts and that kind of thing. And I'd actually been a victim of a data breach myself. When I came back as part of the LinkedIn data breach. And I was really, really annoyed about it. And then the car phone warehouse one, I thought, for goodness sake. And then GDPR's coming up. And I'm thinking, this is a big thing, but it's so boring. Such a boring, dry, who can bear its subject?
Really?
I thought, that's what I've done in Sweden, in Stockholm. I've taken these concepts, which are quite boring, and try to put it in a way, frame it in a way where individuals who are quite reluctant to it, teenagers, to get to a point where I wouldn't say they're enjoying it, but they're at least putting their thought and putting some actions behind it and that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I'm going to throw myself into this. I've got quite an obsessive personality in terms of learning, and I just read and watched every webinar under the sun that came to it. And I fell into dentistry because I didn't really I was off LinkedIn after the data breach, and there was some sort of professional Facebook groups, and there was GDPR for dentists, which was run by Derek Utenbroek of Ignite Growth Marketing. Mm-hmm. And so Derek is a GDPR practitioner like me, and he worked for one of the big banks for their GDPR sort of setup, basically, readiness program. And it started off with about 280 people, and by the time we closed the group, I think it was about 4,000 people that were there. Peter ran it as well. And we were able to basically take these questions and try to work through a lot of the misinformation that was coming through. And we were doing Facebook Lives and that kind of stuff. And I tell you what, that is the best way to learn. When people throw these questions out to you, you've got to research it, right? Even though you're not giving them formal advice.
But also it proves it was a topic of interest.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And at this time as well, I'm a GDPR consultant that's working for a consultancy. They're based in Herefordshire. And I really enjoyed it. And I've made some really good friends in dentistry just off the back of that group. Then it came up that there was a role for the data protection officer at IDH, my dentist. And I thought, well, let's go for it. Because I've started to realize, as you probably yourselves have got this as well, is that there's some professions where people say they're experts in dentistry. They're not dentists, but to consult on this particular thing. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, you just slap dentistry, dental in front of it and charging a dental tax, right? And then there's some areas where actually you do need to know the ins and outs of the industry to really show how this particular subject works. You can't just slap dental on it and think, oh, I'll charge double. You really have to live and breathe dentistry, not to a point where you can start doing fillings, but you need to know the business of dentistry to be able to apply this stuff properly. And that's what got me the job at my dentist. And that was 600 practices. I actually looked after more practices than any other data protection officer in the country.
But the difference between, and the difference between watching webinars, learning the theory, and physically on a daily basis dealing with the needs of 600 practices, several thousand people, hundreds of thousands of patients, your knowledge and learning just skyrockets, doesn't it? Because, like I say, there's a difference between understanding the theory of what something does and then actually then needing to apply it in a real situation. We all do that, don't we? I know we all learn in different ways, but I know from my own experience, if I learn something and can apply it within a short period of time, a day or two, it really sticks. So your knowledge and learning must have just come on at such a pace, looking after so many practices.
Absolutely. And it was stressful. Every data protection officer finds their job stressful. And whilst they have a level of protection, they're not actually liable if things go wrong. You still feel that responsibility, that accountability, because you are the advisor, you're the contact point. And like you said, for so many people, but it was extremely valuable. I worked in the legal team at my dentist, fantastic friends in there, people I really look up to this day, learned so much of them regarding greater risks which are presented to dentistry that are outside of data protection. But because personal data is everywhere, is in every corner of dentistry, I had to learn every corner of dentistry.
I suppose dentists just don't think about it, do they? It's just like, no, it's not something that would be. We find it sometimes, don't you? You'll ask for, I don't know, information, and they'll send you information. It's like, you shouldn't really have sent us this.
Yeah.
Please, we don't want it. Can you have it back again? We just want numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
I think data hit me. I watched that program on Netflix, Social Dilemma, and that kind of talked about the number of data points out there and how much data we volunteered and shared on ourselves, and how now, because of this digital matrix of information, how it joins up and how people learn so much about people. And it's incredible. And the weirdness is that we volunteer most of this information. We make it publicly available ourselves. We're almost kind of the greatest breach ourselves by just giving away valuable information.
Isn't that what they say though? The biggest issue with any security system or any data is the human, because they're the ones who mess it up.
And that can be the consumer. I mean, that's the thing. If something's free, you're the product. If you're like Facebook, you're giving away your data. That's the contractual agreement that they're allowed to target to you within their environment. They're going to take all these different behavioural activities. You can't stop it.
But that's how it commercially works. We give them our information. They can then turn it into a package and sell it to sponsors and exploit it for commercial gain. And like I say, it's amazing that we do it willingly on the basis. And it's funny how it's presented as a social network, because we can stay in touch with people and we can communicate and we can share pictures. But actually all the time, you're just providing more and more data points on how you live your life, what you buy, what you don't like, who your friends are, who's your football team, who you might vote for. And all that just gets packaged up. Yeah.
And if you look at Google and Facebook, they're bigger than some oil companies that have been around for decades. And they're run by people in their 30s. Who are the founders.
Yeah, incredible.
So it's an incredible thing. But I think actually when we do reflect on that, it's quite good, because often when we think of data protection, albeit on the face of it, does seem to be a dry subject. I have to admit that. But actually, that's my selling point, because I'm able, hopefully, I will say it, I can.
No, you do. You make it colourful. I was going to say, you make it, and I think with most things, it's kind of how you go about it. I'm sure there's 90% of people that talk about this, and by now we'd have probably had some tech problem and we'd have cut you off, because we'd be bored. Whereas you do bring colour to it.
You just got to with these things, because it is important. And as we were talking about social media, we are watching these documentaries. They are emotive. We are thinking about ourselves and our own privacy and our kids and the next generation and that kind of thing. We never did that before because it wasn't really an issue. But it does show actually that data protection legislation is a mixture of privacy and security. So the privacy is being, can we actually do this? Should we be collecting this data? Should we be using it for this purpose? Should we be sharing it? Should we be keeping it for that long? All these sorts of things. Yeah. And the security side actually of GDPR is quite minimal. It's about, don't get hacked. Maintain the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of data. it's actually a small sliver of the wider thing. But the privacy thing is actually really, really important, because the vast majority of complaints that I see that hit dental practices are where patients are concerned around the privacy or privacy. My wife tells me off when I say privacy. The privacy of their data. You know, why it's being used. Why are you asking me how much I drink or smoke? You know, I'm going to go to the ICO about that, all this sort of stuff. But it's quite sobering to know that those two different things. And actually, this bit is actually, when you get under the skin of it, it's quite fascinating, because you start applying and think about your own life and thinking, why are they asking me that? When I go to that particular organisation, what are they going to do with that data?
Before we get into the data knowledge and responsibility bit, just talk me through. So you were working for My Dentist, and then there may have been bits in between, but then you decided to step out on your own, use your skills, your experience, and set up your own business. Is there family history in entrepreneurship and being business owners? What kind of drew you down that path where you wanted to have your own gig?
Yeah. So my dad had his own business, was an entrepreneur. His story, the sort of the 60-second version was in the 50s, he moved to Canada with about $30. It's like easy to emigrate there. Worked in this uranium mine in the middle of the Rockies. Got really sick, got broke. Had an opportunity to go down to Mexico with his mates, jumped in the car, last bit of money to his name, ended up becoming a professional gambler, a con man, came back to the UK, to Brighton, as a millionaire, effectively. He had, sports cars and penthouse apartments on Brighton Beach by the Grand Hotel, this kind of thing. Wow. And he set up his own business, a door-to-door salesman, had loads across the country selling Hoovers or vacuum cleaners, right?
Wow.
So he kind of learned it in a very, very weird, bizarre way, and he's a fantastic salesman. But then, my dad got to a point where actually he didn't like that side of it, but still wanted to be his own businessman, and be able to help people. And we have this nice family, 6-bedroom home in the middle of Devon, on which he, for 35 years, my mum and I sold 3-piece suites, sofas. As simple as that. But you know what? Rarely did someone walk in this house and not buy a sofa off them. Because DFS, all these kind of places, and they do it because they were fantastically kind to people, very persuasive, built up trust and this kind of thing. And to be honest, when I was speaking to my mum, my grandfather, his father, had that same kind of attitude as well. Weren't these sleazy salespeople? Whilst my dad had this con man background to him, he made a vow to him never to apply those manipulation tactics ever again, and he never did. So there is a little bit of a colourful history there.
This is what
I didn't want to do it, Andy. Didn't want to do it. Didn't want to be a business owner until I started getting the calls last year. Sometimes 2:00 in the morning, people have my number who had a data breach, had a complaint. Principals that were in tears, thought they were going to lose everything. They called up one of the compliance solution providers. Oh yeah, that's a £17 million fine for that. No, it's not.
What?
So it's things like this which made me think, actually, I want to get back to helping independent practices, because actually they are the prime target for a lot of nastiness at the moment, which we'll go into in a bit later.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you kind of you didn't fall into it, but you did have kind of that history and that push that pointed you in the right direction, and it just felt the right thing to do. So at the moment within dentistry, is there a disconnect in dentistry and the wider profession between that kind of knowledge of data and what you do with it and how it should be managed safely? Is there a case where people are saying, well, I know I have all this information, but I'm not entirely sure how it should be managed? Is that something that we've moved away from, and people are now much better at understanding how they should be managing it, or are we still early days?
It's a difficult one to say. I would say, if you put a gun to my head and it was a yes or no, I would say yes, there is a big disconnect.
Right.
But I don't want to blame the dentist for that. And I'm not just saying that because they're my potential clients. I'm just saying that because a lot of industries have the same thing. GDPR was built upon accountability, upon a top-down approach. And the issues is that it was rushed through so quickly that there wasn't enough time for the leadership teams of organizations to really understand what was going on. Or like anything compliance, well, most things compliance-wise in a dental practice, it falls on the shoulders of a practice manager, of which there's a high turnover. So that information, that contextual information is not landing with the ones who are actually accountable for it, the ones who can get in a lot of big trouble for it. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily their fault. I would say that at the time, and what my main thing was to try and battle against, it, there's so much misinformation, more than any other sector that I've ever worked for was in dentistry.
It's interesting.
And it was kind of like, it won't affect us. Don't worry, guys. It'll be fine. Just, update your privacy notice. It's basically what we've done before. Bob's your uncle, blah, blah, blah.
Wow,
and the reality is that's not the case.
So I've probably got a fair idea what the answer to this is, but how do most people react when there's a patient complaint about how their data's been used? What is the typical reaction from a practice?
Emotional. As with any first thing with a complaint, or if you get a bad Google review, it's like someone's spat at you. It's not a nice thing because you work so hard. You've got all these things going on, and you think, why do we deserve this?
Yeah.
What the problem that we've got with data protection complaints is often they're weaved into other complaints, like clinical complaints, or your receptionist is very rude, and you just got those patients that just throw everything at you, and another thing, and another thing. But the issue is with it, and which is why practices have to be particularly careful, is if someone knows their stuff, they'll do this on purpose. They'll try and bait you by putting a complaint in among a load of wider things for you to probably forget about or ignore or not think it's important. And actually you have statutory 1 month to respond to a data protection complaint. And there's certain things that you have to put in your response. And they're really, really important, particularly when you're looking to sell the practice. One thing I ask for in due diligence is show me any data protection complaints you've had. I'm not talking about stuff that went to the ICO, that actually came to you.
So that month limitation, I guess that's quite important to recognise. So if people get a complaint, what should they do? What are the top few things, if that comes in, should they do? Because obviously, clearly you don't want to be an ostrich and just put your head in the sand. You probably don't want to go back kind of, in an emotional state, which is never a great time to start a conversation. But what are the few things they should do to get themselves going?
Well, the first thing to do is extract it from the wider complaint if it is part of one. And then the next thing is to see is this actually the evidence of a data breach? Now, a data breach is a security incident where data has been sent to the wrong person, or it's been deleted by mistake, or that kind of thing. Because if it's a data breach, you haven't got a 1 month time period. You've got potentially 72 hours to report it to the ICO.
Oh, okay.
So you've got to have it. Now, but I would say that majority of practices actually don't really know what the definition of a data breach is. They think anything that's wrong about data is a data breach. Actually, it's just that security incident side of things. Now, if it's something that is more about the way that data is being used, so the privacy side of things. So, for example, the practice failed to respond to a record request or a subject access request, then you do have 1 month to respond to that. And it's about being calm. It's about doing your investigation, documenting what you've got. And what the really important thing is remember who might be the recipient of this complaint or your response. It could be the ICO. So you've got to really be careful of what you put in there, and always, always, always at the bottom of your response to your complaint, give them an opportunity or tell them they're dissatisfied with your response, that they can complain to the ICO. A little bit like with FCA stuff that sometimes, we see.
Out of interest, Adrian, can I just ask a real quickie one? And it might be a real obvious one, but it wasn't to me, so I'm a bit thick. So 72 hours. If it was a Friday, does that include a weekend, or is it 72 hours like business hours?
It includes the weekends.
Oh, wow.
And data breaches love to happen on 5
so
p.m.
if someone's really smart, they'll do it at 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that starts when the organisation becomes aware of the breach, right? So that's why you have to make sure your whole team
knows what to do with it.
What a data breach is.
Because the clock really is ticking, isn't it? 5 o'clock. Then by the time you come to Monday, if that's the first time you've only got that day to sort it out. Really.
Yeah, exactly. And, the ICO are expecting you to know every corner of your investigation. And, I will say this, I have missed the 72 hours because maybe there's been 3 or 4 data breaches that have happened in the same time, but 3 of them were actually seem to be the most important ones, but they were just red herrings. It actually wasn't a data breach. Right. And the one I thought, we'll put that on number 4, happened to be one. Right. And, the ICO understand that. If you have to explain it. But what the big issue is where a receptionist has had like a phone call from someone who says, you've attached my medical history form to your email newsletter that's gone out to 20,000 people. And then they tell the practice manager when they come back from holiday 2 weeks later.
Does that seriously happen?
Yeah.
My goodness.
Oh, my goodness.
And now I suppose that comes down to the how do you stay safe? Is it good systems or well-trained people, or is it a case of one doesn't work without the other?
I think given the facts of the privacy and security.
It's just nuts. I'm still laughing at. Well, laughing is not quite the right word, but
do you know what? I would say I've exaggerated on the 20,000.
But even if you sent it to 500 people, it's just nuts.
Thankfully, there wasn't much information on there, but it wasn't great.
No,
that was an independent practice as well. What I would say, Andy, is because the human element is such a big thing. From privacy and security infringements, security being the data breach side of things, I would prioritize the training side of things.
Right. Yeah.
So for example, that's something I'm working on to make sure there's probably decent training out there that's actually that people are going to digest is relevant and for dental scenarios. But the other thing is, from a security perspective, looking at sort of the hacker's arbitrage, the risk profile that exists now for dental practices, I would say is make sure your data is backed up correctly. And to give you an illustration with this, if you've got, you're at home, there's been a spate of burglaries in the area, probably the first thing you're going to do is find out, where's all your jewelry, and make sure that's either in a safe or it's in a safety deposit box at the bank. That's going to be the first thing you do, because that's the thing. If someone broke in, you're going to rush and have a look. Are my wife's pearls or whatever, diamond watts or whatever it might be, are they safe? So making sure your data is backed up correctly is the priority thing, because if someone manages to breach your systems and they can use very sophisticated attacks, what they're going to want to do primarily is deploy ransomware, which is to encrypt all of your data, including your backups. And the vast majority of practices, that's a really easy thing to do. A teenager with a couple of days hacking experience could take down a dental practice.
Yeah.
Well,
so and I think, sadly, in dentistry, dental practices are starting to become targets, because I think they obviously hold a fair amount of sensitive information and data,
and they're wealthy.
And I think if you get your price point right, you can probably get someone to pay £10,000-20,000 because they just want it to go away. But that's a significant sum of money to get something back that was yours 24 hours ago.
And this is what's happening in America. I'm working with a firm out there to educate dentists in the States regarding ransomware and these sort of basic things. They had a massive breach or ransomware attack. It took out 400 practices in one day. Lost all their data.
Yeah.
There's another independent practice out there that's lost their data as well. I think a year's worth of data because they hadn't checked their backup. Can't sell the practice. Can't sell it. No one wants to buy it because they're the same here. It's a litigious society over there. They need that data. Or there's so many complaints. It's a data lemon that no one wants it. So I think make sure that your backups are off-site, cloud. They're monitored correctly. That sort of thing is really, really important. But shop around. Don't get mugged off with the dental tax with these things. make sure you're finding something which is going to be resilient and works for you and is affordable, and which they are now. But the old days of just doing it locally, I will back up to a USB drive. I mean, it's like putting those jewels in a paper bag.
Yeah. And would you say that dental practices and the profession are generally quite good at having those systems in place? Because you were saying that training's great, but you end up potentially with the well-trained people, but no systems to support them. So a dentist is quite good at contracting in those services to make sure they've got that underpinning to support their team.
It's a bit of a mixed bag. I know I won't name names, but I know one of the IT consultants, this is a good example, who will only take on practices that ensure that they have cloud backups, monitored backups. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that's a very good way to do it. He probably says goodbye to a lot of business, or perhaps he picks up business because that's his stand on things, or that's their company's stand on things. And I think that's the right way to be. The issue that you've got is that I suppose we've all been burnt, the millennium bug thing, even though it's 21 years ago, is that people still think that this new IT thing is a bit of, it's snake oil. And I would agree. There's a lot of stuff out there that is snake oil, but having proper backups is not snake oil at all. Yeah. It's a difficult one to answer, and there's a mixed bag out there, unfortunately. Yeah. And
I wouldn't have thought that dentistry is that different from lots of other industries, professions. There'll be some. You'll get some people who will take it, incredibly seriously and have all that's necessary. You'll then have a massive bundle in the middle that are doing their best, and it's okay, but it's not gold standard. And then you probably have outliers at the other end that it's a bit sketchy, and they probably need to get their house in order.
A lot of people probably just don't think their data's worth it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. They imagine, it's not worth it. No one would come for me. But they do, because in effect, they're probably the ones that are most vulnerable and might be up for having to pay some money.
Well, whilst it's a business one, from your experience, what about personal data? Are there things that we as individuals can do, could do, should do, that perhaps we're not doing to make sure that our own personal data stays safe?
As in like my own bank details,
because like I say, this is your world, so you probably see where people slide through these cracks, and are there things that as individuals we could be doing to keep ourselves safer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, passwords are a big one.
Do you need cash? Only,
if you
ever.
Yeah. I just carry gold with me.
Shave a little piece off. There you go, sir.
Yeah. Here's my bar.
Is my answer. No, I would say that your passwords are really important to make sure that they're complex, and also making sure you have something which is called two-factor authentication on some of your main accounts, like your email, your bank, eBay, that kind of thing. What that means, that two-factor, also called multi-factor authentication, it means that when you log into that particular account, you need another code to put in afterwards. So it could be a text message, some kind of other authentication. And what it means is that if your account details get compromised, then what happens is the hacker will take that. They'll buy your username and password. They'll chuck it in a bot. They'll deploy it out into the internet, and they'll check all the main systems to see if they can actually get through. Now, eBay and LinkedIn, all this kind of stuff should be detecting this stuff, but they still manage to get through. So 99% of the compromised mail accounts that belong to Microsoft, so Office 365, so 99% of them those attacks could have been prevented had people have had two-factor authentication in place.
Right.
So it's really, really important that you have that. You can check out the strength of your password as well. If you go into Google and you put in password strength tester or whatever it might be, don't put your actual password in there. I will stress that, but put a variation of it. And what it will do is it will have a look at the makeup DNA of your password in terms of characters and that kind of thing. And it will tell you how many years it would take for one of those bots to actually...
That's interesting.
So mine's like 300,000 centuries or something stupid like that. Right?
What do you use, Adrian?
It's Andy Accent. I'll tell you what. I won't tell you what it is, but I'll tell you the technique that I use. My mum used to sing a nursery rhyme. It's a line from a nursery rhyme that I thought was quite common, but it turned out that she just made it up, basically. So it's three lines from that. Three lines on shirt. Then 3 lines from that nursery rhyme she made up, and I changed some of them to like capital letters and a number in that kind of thing. And 3 random words is actually probably the best thing that you can do. But you know what? I tested my password that I had for LinkedIn. Considering I've worked for education, I've worked in FCA, I've worked for the police. I tried my password that got attacked in LinkedIn data breach, and it would have taken about 2 days to breach that. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
So on average, a compromised email and username and password on the internet, I read this recently, nowadays with the technology that hackers have, and they buy this off the shelf, this stuff, this is not sophisticated, is 6 hours. They actually tested it. They put an email and password out into the dark web. It got bought, tested, and the account was hacked within 6 hours of purchase.
Yeah, scary. Going to get changed with passwords now.
Yeah,
I always used to think, that you see those things that they're called. Is it sort of like password manager or something? And you put all your passwords in it, and then I think to myself, what happens if they get hacked?
Well, that has happened recently.
So I was glad I didn't do it.
You lose all.
Someone said to me, "Oh, well, there's this really good thing, and you can put all your passwords in." I thought, well, that's a great idea. And then I thought, actually, that's rubbish because all my passwords are now in one place. So if that then gets hacked, I've lost all my passwords.
To be fair to them, that if you go to the reputable one, you should be all right. But there are a lot of we do this now for £1 a year or whatever.
It'd be a great scam, wouldn't it? You set up your own password protection company, get everybody's password, flog them, and off you go.
It's also a breach of the Computer Misuse Act. But,
those people won't care because they'll be based in somewhere you'll never find them.
It is a minefield as a topic.
Wow.
I know kind of it comes under this broad umbrella of GDPR, but I think just privacy and data and how to cope and deal with it and how to train people. It's a huge area, and genuinely you bring light to it. And I think a lot of it is stories, isn't it? You kind of share your message through telling stories that engages people because it's an important topic, but because it's not sexually interesting, people don't want to spend much time dwelling on it and thinking about it. But it can be costly if you don't.
The thing that struck me that, I know that it wasn't 20,000 people, and okay, there wasn't much on that medical questionnaire, but one, I'm stunned that someone did that, and that says that either someone didn't know what they were attaching or didn't know how and it's just a real simple one that you sort of assume, don't you, sometimes that people know what they're going to attach, and then if they don't know, they attach the wrong thing.
And it's just a simple mistake.
There'll be dentists who'll watch this, listen to this, and they'll go, "Oh, it's ridiculous. That's never going to happen." And the answer is, it does happen. Yeah, it does happen.
I haven't done that, but I've sent an email to the wrong person.
Yeah.
Even in my data protection career, thankfully it wasn't that bad. It was embarrassing, horrifically embarrassing.
Yeah.
But now, when I send an email, I feel like I'm diffusing a bomb. And the thing is, I have to check. Obviously, I check my spelling and grammar and that kind of thing through Grammarly, thank goodness. But then I check, who am I sending it to? I've got a few domains, so am I sending it from the right email address as well?
Yeah.
What have I actually attached? Let's go back and just open it again, just to make sure that I haven't just picked it because it's the most recent.
That final check. Yeah, that final check that you've got it. Yeah. You've got it right.
If you can embed in your practice a culture of check before you send, a 5-second check could save us thousands of pounds, because the average compensation claim for a medical data breach is between £3,500 and £5,000.
That's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, that check before you send, I think if people just did that, you imagine how many issues, and this applies to anybody and everybody, doesn't it? If we all did that, and like you say, at the very best end, it saves some embarrassment by sending an email to the wrong person, and at the worst end, it's saved a serious, data privacy breach.
Yeah, and it keeps everything. If you can have that habit within yourself as, as a professional, as a private individual, that kind of thing. It's not that big of a pain. No. It's for me now, I do it without even thinking about it. Every now and then I have a bit of a flashback when, I did send that email to the wrong person.
But that's the power of consistency, isn't it? If you just do it every single time.
It's not just the money, is it, though? It's as you were saying, the first reaction is emotional. You've got the emotional stress of you've done something wrong, and then what might happen? You might lose your practice. Or, I know by the sounds of things that's an overreaction, but you end up with, not only is it going to cost you physical cash, but it's going to cost you emotional cost and actual physical time cost to resolve something that, as you say, check before you send. 5 seconds. Is it really the right thing? I think yours is a great one, as you say, Adrian, is that, have I actually attached just the last file, or did I really attach the right file? And have a look, open it, see what it says. It's quite interesting.
Here's one, Chris. This happens all the time. Well, I say all the time. It's happened 3 or 4 times this year. I've had a phone call of a data breach like this, and I felt ever so sorry for the receptionist, right? And put yourself in the position of the receptionist. They've clicked on a blank, what they think is a blank medical history form, right? It comes up on Adobe, looks blank, they've checked it, they've done the right thing, they've closed it. But the thing with Adobe, sometimes if you've got information that's written over that, overlaid over it, it takes a few seconds to generate. So they've clicked on what they think is blank, then they've closed it, then they've sent out an actual pre-filled one. Sometimes the tech's against us, So I think just open it up, give it a few seconds, just know what it is, get the right systems. We only use, that's definitely the blank one, never overwrite of it, blah, blah, blah. These sorts of things. Will it still happen? Yes, but you're mitigating that risk. And if you've got the training there and that sort of thing, and it comes to the ICO goes to it, they'll say, look, this is a one-off. Heck, the ICO calls 3 data breaches in their communications to me, so they do it, right? If you're listening to ICO, I'm really sorry I told you that, but they're not listening. But the thing is, it's so easy done. I mean, that was nothing. It was like some person's name. It wasn't that big of a deal. I'm not going to cause a hoo-ha about it. But the thing is that it's if you can be in front of the judge. And you can say, actually, in our practice, we have annual training. We every practice management or practice meeting, we raise the importance of data protection. We have a check before you send policy in the practice. This is a one-off, Your Honour, and you feel comfortable with that. Then that's what it is. If it's a case, which most practices we haven't done training for 3 years, we've actually got all new staff.
I think that final piece is nice, and I feel I should almost wrap up with the don't have nightmares, because it's that thing, isn't it? They are rare, and most people are trying to do the right thing. And what you said is right, in that I think if you're able to demonstrate that you have systems, you do train your people, but we are fallible and we made a mistake. You would hope that the authorities would go, okay, well, don't do it again. What are you going to put in place to make sure that this can't happen again? And they kind of work with you, because people don't set out to fail. They don't set out to cause these problems, do they? It's about how you
the ICO must look. I mean, I don't know. They must look at the fact of you're a dentist or a small business who has limited resources, and you're doing your best, as opposed to someone like, I don't know. I think, did BA get fined for a big data breach or something? And they're a massive company handling millions of people's data and stuff like that. So they really should have policies and processes and systems in place. So I'd imagine the ICO sort of looks at it and says, look, you're little blokey, so I'm going to give you a bit of a hard time, but actually, as long as you're showing you're doing an effort, whereas you boys, you've been doing this with data, so therefore I'm going to teach you a lesson that will hopefully resonate around the market that says data's really important, and handle it properly.
I'd agree that definitely. The only thing I would say, and just that this is quite a sobering thing, probably just to end up on, is I will have don't have nightmares bit at the end of this. The first GDPR fine in the ICO was a small healthcare organisation, the same size as dental practice, and they were fined £275,000. So it's going through the courts at the moment as part of an appeal process. Wow! And to be honest, they didn't cooperate with the ICO. They didn't say the right things. They were trying to hide stuff. It's their own fault, to be honest. But the thing to remember, if you're a dental practice owner, practice manager listening to this, or associate thinking about your practice, whatever, think about buying a practice or getting a squat, you've got to remember that the ICO and the fines and that kind of thing is just one portion. In fact, I don't even think about the fines, but just remember the ICO don't understand the value of data in dentistry. They don't understand what level of sensitivity it has compared to maybe a cancer or mental health trust or that kind of thing. So often when I'm dealing with ICO investigations, a lot of it is me educating the investigation officer about how data actually works in dentistry. And afterwards, they're often like, oh, okay, well, that's not so bad, I suppose, in this case. But yeah, it's still not great, but you have to be able to frame it. That's where my sort of experience comes in. And off the back of that as well, is that it might seem a little bit scary when you hear about the ICO, but also be aware that the data subject, whether that's a disgruntled ex-member of staff or a patient, whatever it might be, they often are trying to weaponize GDPR. They put in data breach compensation and seeing how much money they could possibly get. And a lot of it is just rubbish. They haven't met the threshold of seriousness for compensation. So it could be though, but just remember that just because something goes wrong, you're not going to get hit by a 20 million euro fine or 70 million pounds, whatever the equivalent is, or go to prison or that kind of, those things could happen, but don't feel that you're being backed into a corner because it's a case by case, and often it's not that, but you have to be very careful how you frame it, put things in writing, that kind of stuff, because you'll be judged on that. Yeah, and that's where I come in.
That's been brilliant, Adrian. That's been really useful.
Use an expert.
I think. Well, I was going to say, I think use an expert. It's run your business in the best way possible. Make sure you're training your team. You've got good systems.
Don't hide. Don't pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah. Kind of don't go missing. It's been enlightening. It's been brilliant. It's been really good. So we always ask our guests two questions when we get to the end. And the first question we always ask is, if you could be a fly on the wall in a situation, where would you like to have been and seen a scenario unfold?
So this is a very difficult question. And you know what I did is I thought I'm going to wait until literally just before we started this to think what's my gut reaction. And I'm a massive, might surprise you, Frank Sinatra fan, huge, of a particular era between 1958 and 1968. Okay. That's my is
this your mastermind subject?
Yes, absolutely. So here's my wife got me an original print of one of my favourite. You can see my ring light there. Look, Cycles by Frank Sinatra. Incredible album, one of my favourites. And basically, you think nowadays it takes months, don't they, have all these different producers and tech and this kind of thing. Sinatra literally walked into an orchestra. They gave him a list of songs because he didn't write his own songs. List of songs and covers and stuff for him to do. He's there smoking, drinking whiskey. He's got a girl on his arm. Does it, has a load of drinks for the band, walks out, and one of the best albums ever been created.
Well, you just did it in one sitting.
Sorry?
Yeah, just pretty much. In one sitting. Wow.
Pretty much, yeah. You see it on the. You can read it on the back of the album. Yeah. So to be a fly on the wall with that, to listen to that live, because it was the biggest orchestra that he'd ever sung with, and you can really tell that on the LP, would have just been amazing for me as a musician.
So my follow-up question, and there might be a link here, is if you could meet somebody, fictional, non-fictional, living, no longer with us, who would you meet if you were given the opportunity? Would it be Frank?
I would. No, actually, I think it would be Johnny Cash.
Oh, Johnny!
In his last sort of 5 years, when he was doing when Hertz came out and
9 Inch Nails
the American albums, I think that would have been what a phenomenal life he had. I was going to say Jim Morrison, but he probably wouldn't. Who knows what he'd be on?
Oh, yeah.
So that would be you could hang around for a while until he comes out.
Yeah, that'd be a wild afternoon with Jim Morrison, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I think it would be Johnny Cash.
But obviously, music's a big part of your life.
Yeah, definitely. Helped me through some bad times and good times. So Yeah, definitely music related with those.
Adrian, it's been an absolute blast.
Yeah, it's been fabulous. Thank you.
I must admit, given the subject, I was dreading it, to be blunt. I thought it was going to be really boring. I thought it was going to be a horrendous hour, but you brought some real light to it. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah. And that light's shining brightly.
I didn't even turn my iPad on.
Yeah, sorry if I've been too... I should have covered it.
I can see you now.
Any reviews of people saying, I thought it was going to be horrendous, but it wasn't, it's fine with it.
Perhaps that should be your strap line.
Honestly, I was looking forward to it, because I think it's one of those areas, isn't it, where it gets overlooked. And I think quite often in life, those things that are important, we don't necessarily pay attention to the extent we should. And when we do, it's too late. It's that classic, the horse has bolted mentality. And I hope by sharing this message and people listening to this, they might make some tweaks and adjustments to their own business or how they manage their own data. And it keeps them safer. And this podcast is about sharing that knowledge, helping people improve their business. But, doing it in a light-hearted way. And I think we've achieved that.
It's a way to de-stress, isn't it? Look at any of this stuff is like, how can it's hard enough running a business. So the more you can do to take away the pressure points where you will get stress is got to be a result. Yeah. And, this is one that is probably the massively underlooked part of running a business. People just don't think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's about, I think with anything in dentistry, I mean, I know as well, if I'm helping a client who's, it may not even be data protection related, but something goes and they think, I don't know what to do with this. Like, well, I know someone. Yeah. I know someone that could be able to help you out with this. And I think that, this podcast and lots of other initiatives that are going on at the moment through social media, it's brilliant because we get to know who these people are. So I'm very, very, privileged to be here. I very much appreciate it.
Appreciate your time.
Really
we do. It's been fabulous. Yeah, super. Look after yourself, fella. No doubt we'll be speaking soon.
Thanks ever so much.
Lovely. Excellent. Cheers. Take care. Keep well. Cheers. Ta-da. What a brilliant chat with Adrian.
That was fabulous. Really good.
I think he's got a topic that is important.
It's as dry as the beach.
It is. It's important, but it's not interesting. But he brings it to life with colour and stories. But I think the thing that for me, and he said, just check the email before you send it.
Yeah.
And we've all been in an embarrassing situation where we've sent an email to the wrong person. And he just said, just before you send it, stop. What's it about? Who are you sending it to? And have you attached the right document? Yeah. And I think we could all learn a massive thing from that. Just before you hit send, just stop.
Yeah. I was stunned by that. Yeah, well, you probably got it, that thing with the sending out the medical questionnaire.
Yeah.
Someone's medical questionnaire to your patient list.
Yeah.
I mean, it just defies. Because you think, how did someone do that? But the answer is they did do it, which either is a failure of process, a failure of training or whatever. Yeah. But that is such a simple thing to avoid.
About training was more important than the systems. And that's a classic one where, for whatever reason, that something went wrong. Yeah. But they're good things like that to highlight, because it could happen to any of us. We all think that we're infallible, but the reality is, humans make mistakes.
And also, I think the fact for me is, anyone who has a practice who needs GDPR, who needs to understand GDPR, then they need to talk. And I know we don't promote the people, but I don't really know anyone else. You need to talk to Adrian because ultimately, he's going to keep you safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
You shouldn't only talk to Adrian when it goes wrong.
Yes.
Do something to stop it going wrong.
Yeah.
Fascinating. It's a really good lad. Really good.
I think people will take a lot from that.
Yeah, really brilliant.
Good. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.